Okay, here we are with our flagship show, Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, organized by the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum and Hawaii Energy. And so today we have Ben Sullivan, who joins us by Skype audio from Kauai. He's the energy coordinator of the County of Kauai. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks for having me. It's always fun to join you guys for a few minutes.
Absolutely. Looking forward to this discussion.
Oh, yeah.
And with me to my left is Ray Starling, co-host of the show with Hawaii Energy. And Ray, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Okay. Yeah. All right, and then we have Derrick Sonoda to his left, who is with Hawaii Energy, and who has a special report from the Negawatt Moment. What do you say?
I wanted to tell everybody hi and happy holidays to all of you.
Okay.
We're in the season, we all have to smile a little bit more.
Okay, yes.
But for a Negawatt Moment today, I wanted to tell you a little bit about what Hawaii Energy will be offering next year, very soon. And what this is going to be is, have you heard of the building operator certification? Where there's a lot of buildings out there, and many of them are operated by people who did really well in their jobs and they got promoted. They were maybe from maintenance or someplace else. But this program helps those people learn a little bit more about the technology, the vocabulary, and the issues that they will face moving forward in time. So we call this the building operator certification. What's interesting about this next one, it's a level 2. So the level 2 people are a little bit more on the chief engineering side. So these people handle bigger facilities. These are going to be all your resorts. This is going to be the Class A buildings that you see in town. So if you know of somebody, you're a property manager, you're working at a resort or hotel, you want to kind of pass this information over to them. It's an exciting course. It's going to be over a few weeks long, and Hawaii Energy is subsidizing the majority of the tuition costs. And I need to put my glasses on just a little bit to tell you what it's going to be.
I haven't seen this in months with the glasses.
I know, it's time.
You know, you look different, Derrick.
Well, I hope it's just a little bit better, especially for this time. So what we're going to be doing is you have to complete your application in here by January 27th. You have to do everything there is, and there's a small portion that you pay. Hawaii Energy will pay $1,400 on your behalf, and you just pay a small portion of just $200. There will be a total of 6 different classes. And I'm just going to give you some ideas of what the topics are going to be. Preventative maintenance, advanced electrical systems, HVAC troubleshooting, HVAC controls, building commissioning, and enhanced automation and demand reduction. So these are some of the topics that you hear all around town. They really make a difference to the bottom line. And people with certifications, their buildings usually save 20% more than a building that has been operated by people who did not go through this class. So again, thank you from Hawaii Energy. Please check us out on hawaiienergy.com. And if you have any questions, feel free to send us an email or call us.
I've got a question.
Yes.
This looks like it's building operator certification.
Yes.
2.
2.
Or that might be 11.
It's actually
it's
2.
All right.
It's
so,
2.
Do you have to have number 1 before you can get certified to 2?
It's best to do number 1.
Okay.
And those people who have entered those classes, they may have not had a higher education degree. But if you have a higher education degree, so you graduated with an engineering degree, and you know, being who you are, Ray, you have multiple degrees.
Oh.
And so, you know, you wouldn't have to do number 1, you can do number 2. And just jump right in there.
Okay. That's good.
I have a question.
Yes.
How close is this, and how much does it involve the Building Owners and Managers Association, BOMA? Because BOMA, you know, it strikes me, this is right up BOMA's alley.
It is.
Is it a level where building owners and operators in BOMA would benefit?
They would benefit if they send their personnel who takes care of the building.
Yeah.
And we know one of the big differences for this one particular offering is, when we first started offering this a few years ago, the people who actually work in that position, they were so grateful that Hawaii Energy brought it to them. This is in combination with the University of Hawaii, Manoa Outreach Campus, Paulette Feeney. It was their first class that they've ever attended designed for people with their background. And since that very first class after class, almost 100 people have come through, and there have been from the banks buildings, they've been from the hospitals, multiple hospitals have done this, many of the hotels through Waikiki, and some of the other bigger properties. And every single graduating class, same consistent message. Thank you so much. I've learned so much. what they've learned.
And saved
from the
so
knowledge-
much money.
Saved so much. But the other wonderful thing is just like how you guys are collaborating in the policy arena, they have now found that they can collaborate in their own arena. The reason why they can now do that is they never had a common language to communicate the issues and the problems that they've seen in their facilities.
Yeah.
They developed their own language and terms for when situations go wrong, but those were not transferable terms. But now they have a common
So
language.
is the course taught in English?
The course is taught in
I
English
just want to
sometimes.
be sure that we haven't got a new language. For
No,
the
no, no,
program.
but don't forget now, Pidgin is now a recognized language. So
Okay.
that is a language.
Thank you, Derek.
Yes, so many of us are now bilingual.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So, you know, what comes to me on this, the BOMA thing, is that, you know, BOMA controls an awful lot of space, millions and millions of square feet of space.
How many millions?
Millions and
Millions,
millions,
okay.
and maybe millions more.
Oh.
I mean, a lot of space. All the office buildings,
Yes.
a lot of commercial buildings too. And if you teach the BOMA people something, if you know inculcate in them some Hawaii energy efficiency kind of lesson, you know, and give them a benefit they maybe didn't have before, you're not reaching just a couple of residential homes. You're reaching millions and millions and millions of square feet. So tremendous leverage. Also, BOMA talks to each other. They have programs every month. They exchange, a very friendly, collaborative group, you know. And
Exactly.
if one guy knows about it, then a lot of guys know about it. And if that's the case, you know, you have a huge extension on what you teach them at these classes. Yeah.
So Hawaii Energy is doing our best to go ahead and try to reach every level of the ladder that it takes to put in an energy efficiency project. And I'll give you a very simple example. You know, Ray drives an electric vehicle. And next year, he's going to buy me an electric car. But if I don't change the way that I operate the car, I won't see too much savings because I will use my old habits.
Yeah.
But he gets me that new Tesla that we talked about.
Yeah.
I promise not to do the insane mode all the time
Yeah.
and use up all the power.
Yeah.
If I get a little bit of lessons and some understanding, I'll be able to use that car to get the kind of benefits that we kind of predict from it. So
Well,
I'll let you know how that
congratulations
goes.
on the new car. And
Well,
Ray,
thank you.
let me say on behalf of all of our listeners, viewers, and supporters, that's a wonderful thing you're doing for Derek.
Thank you. Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
so I'll speak to Derek about that.
Okay,
right.
let's move on, but Derek's going to stay with us this time. And let's move on and talk about Ben Sullivan and life as the coordinator, energy coordinator in the county of Kauai. Also, he is active in HCEI, the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative Organization. So I guess I'm interested in sort of defining you a little bit. And that means, you know, people forget that when we talk about Nextera and HECO and that $4.3 billion deal, we forget, we're not talking about Kauai.
That's right.
And so, you know, is there buzz on Kauai, Ben? Do people talk about the deal? Or do you just not care? What is it?
Well, I certainly can't speak for everyone on Kauai, Jay, but you know, it's not taking up a lot of my time. I'll be candid with you.
You know, you're blessed for that. It's a special benefit, for sure. But what do you think of it? Can you talk about it as, you know, as an isolated, faraway person?
As an outside observer, I mean, you know, I guess as an outside observer, it seems to me that it's taken up a tremendous amount of resources within the system. And so obviously it's an important decision. Obviously these things happen, you know, people can come in and they can purchase a utility if they so choose. Entities can do this. Takeovers happen. But the question is, how do we continue to move forward with our state's clean energy agenda simultaneously without really bogging down? And I think that's a critical question that needs to be kept, you know, in the forefront as you guys wrestle with this challenge.
Yeah. One more related
Personally,
question is this. You know, you have Hawaii Island Energy Co-op. You have the possibility of municipal energy, you know, production, generation in Maui. How does Kauai see that? I mean, you've sort of perfected an independent approach to energy generation, clean energy generation. Do you see them as kissing cousins or what?
Kissing cousins, you talking about munis versus co-ops kissing cousins?
Well, munis and co-ops on other islands who are talking about models other than the existing utility model.
You know, it's a process, and you still have to run a utility no matter what your business model is. But if you have a good understanding of what the changes that you make when you go to a co-op do, then I think it's definitely something for rural communities to consider. You know, I think it's a whole different conversation when you're talking about Oahu, but But if you're looking at Hawaii Island, there's, it's a very interesting conversation to have over there. I can certainly speak for my own experience here on Kauai, and for what I've seen. KIUC is doing a tremendous job. It's taken a long time to get where they are. It's taken a long time to, transform to becoming a co-op. It's not something that happens overnight, just with a name change or with a change in the way the business paperwork is filed with the state. But it really is a big difference.
Well, what's before we leave the topic, what's new on Kauai? Can you give us a handle about what the edge of the envelope is these days for Kauai? We know it's adventurous and progressive and done really remarkable things, but tell us what the cutting edge is right now.
If you're talking about KIUC, I think you have to talk about their most recently announced project, which is a project that's going to incorporate a large solar farm with a significantly sized battery that will actually load shift. So it'll generate energy middle of the day when the sun is shining, and then it'll shift that energy to the evening peak, and do it very cost effectively. So really exciting stuff we're seeing from the co-op in that regard, and that's via a PPA with a third party that's executing that project. There's other great things going on. Mayor Carvalho has got a team of people that are doing tremendous work with regards to mode shift in transportation and moving towards clean transportation, which is an area that we really need to see some more progress in. So that's very exciting as well.
Now, I can't resist telling you what we learned on Monday at research in Manoa. We had a couple of scientists down from the Hawaii Institute of Geophysics and Planetology that's in SOES there. And they are studying the rate at which meteorites cool. And if you didn't know, I'll be happy to tell you now, meteorites are from the table of elements. They're the same elements that you find on Earth. And they include mostly iron, which is heavy and dense, and nickel, okay? Those two. And when they get hot, here's the point, they stay hot. And they may have a cooling life that's really, 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 really long.
Oh, really?
So I said to these guys, they're researching this now, how long it takes for a meteorite of that composition to cool off. It's a whole long time. What about, heating it up and then taking the energy out of it, just like a battery, because it's going to stay hot a long time? Yes! Last thing I saw, they ran back to their laboratory. But there's another idea for battery right there, right here in UH Manoa.
Well, I hope you get royalties for that.
Yeah, well, you can share.
Thank you.
Instead of your Tesla, I mean.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's jog around to the other side of it now and look at it from Honolulu's side. Ben is active in the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum, and specifically in planning the legislative briefing, which takes place in, I want to say the 22nd of January?
Sounds right.
Right in there
That's
somewhere.
correct.
I wonder if you could talk about that, Ben, about the way this is going to be handled. I find it a very interesting progression to talk, for example, first about climate change and how that should affect our thinking, particularly on the heels of the COP21 conference in Paris.
So, great question, Jay. I was excited to see the outcome of that discussion on the January 22nd as you are, but I think what we've been talking about is framing a conversation that really circles around bringing back this community conversation on the importance of mitigating climate emissions. And we have a great opportunity to do that. It takes years and years and years for our communities and and for everyone to really digest and understand and begin to make these massive shifts that we have to make in order to adjust to the changes that are happening with climate change, as well as to mitigate. And it's time to have that conversation again and just continue to learn. We've made tremendous progress in the electricity sector. One of the real questions is, what can we do to continue that progress, but also to see similar progress take place in the transportation sector? And how much of a motivator is mitigating climate? I think that the outcome from Paris is, in a lot of ways, is tremendous. I mean, a lot of people are, there's very mixed reviews. I'm sure you've heard about there.
Sure.
But at a base level, what we've got is the leaders of the world's nations coming together and saying, hey, this is our goal. There's no more debate about whether we're trying to get to a certain threshold. We need to achieve mitigations enough to keep the world below 2 degrees Celsius. That is agreed. It's done. That's what we got out of Paris in large part. We've got corporations signed on to that. We've got nations signed on to that. And so, what's the value of that goal, and then how do we bring it back to a state and a community level, and work on the problem, I guess, from the other end, as you'd say.
Well, it's interesting because when Energy Policy Forum was first established, it was all about clean energy. It wasn't about cheap energy. It was about clean energy. It was a noble, Al Gore kind of ideal, and with due regard for the risks of climate change. And I mean, that was the buzz. That was the driving force. But you remember that, Ray? You're not so young. You don't remember that.
I do.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Even Derrick, and he's really young, remembers that. So, but the thing is that over the past, since Al Gore anyway, that's like 7 or 8 years at least, maybe closer to 10. We have forgotten climate change. We've been meshed in so many other issues, and a lot of them are economic issues and social issues and government fiscal policy issues, everything, native culture issues, everything. But we have kind of forgotten about the original driver, climate change. That's why I think it's so important, as Ben suggests, that we look at that. Not only now, not only in 2015, not only in this legislative briefing, but all the time and on a repeating basis, which indeed is part of the program in the agreement reached in Paris. They're supposed to look at it every 5 years and take stock.
Right.
Myself, I would have said 2 or 3 years, but hey, that's just me. But we should take a page out of that book, and we should always remember our origins here and what we're really after and what's really important in a global sense. We have responsibilities. Yeah.
We do. We talk a lot, and I'm sorry, I'm going to kind of shift it over back to Ben. So Ben, I've been hearing a lot of great things about what you're doing with the whole island, how you're moving the technology, you're getting the understanding for the bigger issues. I was wondering what you have heard from the communities out there, the moms, the aunties, the uncles over there, if their literacy for the topics that are being discussed are being elevated by all the happenings on your island. I would be interested to know that, because once you can get everybody going in the same direction, I think even faster change can happen. So I was wondering how that front is. I haven't heard too much about how the people there think about all of these things, the common guys who are not directly involved with all of these changes.
I'll tell you why Derrick's question is important, is because Kauai is a laboratory for
Yes,
the other islands.
exactly.
And we can learn from you, Ben, and apply it here, and maybe get some of the obstacles out of the road.
Well, let's get the first thing out of the way first, which is to say that you're not learning from me, right? we're learning from the community.
Yes.
I'm fortunate enough to be in this role, and I get to work for a great guy in Bernard Carvalho. And we really do obviously have climate change as one of our drivers, with a lot of other drivers as far as clean energy and the clean energy agenda. So revisiting it is important. I think Derrick's question is a great one. And I will start by saying, the most recent and most direct interactions we've had is actually just doing another round of outreach with our employees. And so there's, we here at the Civic Center in Lihui, there's several hundred employees who come every day and work and do various things for the county. And it's, quite a diverse group and quite a diverse set of missions, from public works to police to fire protection, and all the way through the gamut, finance, and so we have this. We've been convening this group under really what is a contest. It's the Green Government Challenge is what we're calling it, and we've done some surveying of people about their knowledge on climate change. We've done some education and some basically brown bag lunches where we get together and talk about it, and it's been really, really interesting because everyone has got a role, and I think the thing that comes out when you start to see what's happening with the science is you say, hey, look, this is all very definitive, and there are very few people in this community who do not care about the future, about what they're leaving for their keiki and beyond, and once you connect them with what is really very almost absolute consensus from a scientific perspective, you gain a lot of leverage. People say, hey, I want to be part of this. What do I do next? And I think that's that's what's important. And so, Derek's question is right on the mark. It's our intention to actually try to do that on a much broader scale, and we have done a little bit already as far as community-wide, but we haven't done enough to really answer that question adequately. And I think he's right on the mark as far as that being a key. There have been some community groups that have done outreach on climate change of late, and certainly it seems that every time they put something out there, they get a packed room. So people are thirsty for this information, and we're hopeful that having good dialogue and good community discussion on it will help
And
move
yes,
the ball even more.
and
Go
yet,
ahead.
you guys have the black box, which is saying something because I don't think the other islands have the black box. And you are developing the grid in that with new technology. But you had resistance on that, and you set up a very creative and innovative social way to deal with it, allowing people to opt out. And I somehow the opt out is a metric of sorts. I mean, are people buying into this? You started out with a certain number of people said no, and you let them off. You didn't push them. Is that changing? Are they coming around? It reminds me of my law firm, how nobody wanted to have voicemail. Nobody wanted to have voicemail. And then the youngest associate got voicemail. All of a sudden, all the senior partners wanted voicemail too. So are you finding a progression of people who, used to, be concerned about privacy over the black box? Now they're not so concerned? Are they coming around?
Unfortunately, I don't have good data on that. Anecdotally, I can tell you that it is no longer a driving conversation in the community.
Good.
That is really good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, from my perspective, I've always thought that Kauai was one of the most social islands where they really are supportive to their families and their neighbors there more so than Oahu is.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to hear that information is being disseminated everywhere. So good.
Well, but Ben, it's to your credit that you have, you spent time in Honolulu. You spent time statewide. You are a statewide, energy person. Way beyond being the coordinator in Kauai. You participated with the Energy Policy Forum and with HCEI. And I wonder, just going forward, we're going to take a break in a minute, but I wonder going forward what the connection is. I mean, why, for example, do you spend time statewide? Not your job, really, or is it? And why, what's the relationship with HCEI and the Energy Policy Forum? How do you juggle all those balls?
That's a good question. I just see it as such a big opportunity to leverage what we're doing that I can't pass on the chance to work with you guys. I mean, what the state legislature does always has a big impact on energy policy. What happens throughout the state is always a learning opportunity. There's just no way I would want to miss those opportunities, and I'm really thankful that they're there. I think this whole thing, in terms of how are we going to tackle these problems that are that cross almost every sector. When you start talking about climate change as an example, it really requires massive amounts more collaboration than maybe we have been used to traditionally, and so that's really, as I see it, just part of the job description.
Okay, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the track of that discussion in the legislative briefing on January 22nd, and we're also going to ask Ben about his 10-point program.
Ben, do we have something to talk about? Is there an issue going on with 10 steps or 10 points?
Hello, everybody. I'm IC Davidson. Thanks for tuning in to Think Tech Hawaii. One of the things that we do here, or the thing that we do here, is promote civic engagement in Hawaii. What does that mean? We want to talk about things that people want to hear about, and we want you to engage us and be part of that conversation. One of the ways that you can do that is by joining in during our live show via Twitter. How do you do that? Well, you get on the interwebs and get Twitter, get an account, and mention us if you have a question. What you'll do is you tune into our show live, tweet us questions, and our hosts and guests will address them accordingly. It's really easy, it's really fun, and I think that your participation in what we're doing here will help us continue the dialogue on very important issues that we're trying to cover. Sustainability, clean energy, you name it, we're on top of it. We want you to be part of what we're doing because together we'll be able to make things change. Thank you for watching. Think Tech Hawaii, thinktechhawaii.com, weekdays 12 to 5 p.m. That was weird.
Aloha! How you doing? It's me, Angus McTech, Wishing you to welcome and join us to see us on Hibachi Talk on Think Tech Hawaii. Join my co-hosts, Gordo the Tech Czar and Andrew the Security Guy, every Friday from 1300 to 1345. We look forward to seeing you. We'll talk tech and we'll have some wee bit of fun. And remember, let your wing gang free wherever you be. Aloha!
Okay, we're back, we're live, and the fellow next to me, the handsome guy, that's Ray Starling. Ray, as co-host, you have to, perform certain obligations here in the show. So how about a midterm comment? How are we doing? How's Ben doing?
Ben's doing quite well. Ben is always ready, on the spot with the latest information, and we really appreciate him being on the show. And we tap him periodically for updates on what's happening. Because really, Kauai is the place to be watching right now in terms of they're a couple of light years ahead of where we're at here, and so watching them hit the bumps in the road and figuring out what they are is helpful to us.
Carefully.
Yeah.
So Ben, let's talk about the progression, the track, if you will, of that legislative briefing. We start out with the notion that we better check in on climate change. We can't forget about that. It is a world, may I say, emergency. And even, the targets that were decided in Paris seem fairly modest against the, the problem of temperature change and sea rise and all. But where do you get from there in terms of revealing to the legislature what is happening that they need to know about and what actions they need to take?
So the discussion we've been having in planning this event, Jay, it goes something like this. There's kind of a storyline that says, hey, we all know that climate change is coming, and we all know that it's a serious thing. And there's not, I don't think there's anyone in the legislature at this point, or there may be a few, but there's very few in the legislature, perhaps if no one at all, that would deny that this is a serious threat and that we have to address it. The issue is, how do we quantify it? How do we make it more tangible? And so, what we hope to do is be able to talk about things that are already happening today that are impacts in terms of climate change that we can point to and say, hey, look, these are things that are all around us. We can look at the most recent El Nino storm season. We can look at coral bleaching. We can look at other events around the state, and say, hey, these, no one incident obviously is attributable to climate change, but these are the kind of things that are already occurring. They're going to become more frequent, and most importantly, these are the kind of things that that depending on how we respond on a global basis in terms of mitigating, are going to get much more severe. So I think the key is connecting with people on the idea that, hey, not only is this already happening and some impacts are unavoidable, but we do in fact have a choice as a global community about how we deal with this. And certainly, if we want to be in a position, to make change, we've got to take a leadership role, just like we're already doing in the electricity sector.
Yeah.
So it really opens it up.
You say that no one incident is definitely attributable to climate change, but and maybe it's subjective. But when I see a bad storm without a clear precedent that comes out of nowhere, I attribute it to climate change. And when I see a pattern of storms over a period of months in a given season, and they're worse than you can remember before, I attribute that to climate change. And I wonder, honestly, you guys, why nobody is actually saying that. The press, reports these huge storms you've never heard of before. The storm in New York a couple of years ago, and it was not clear that they associated it with climate change. I did, telling you now.
I think a lot of people do, but I think the difference is that in order to say clearly this is caused by climate change, you have to have enough evidence of that to make it a scientific fact.
We need a meter.
Well,
we need a climate change meter.
But we'll get it over time, perhaps. But I think a lot of people feel the way you do. And from my point of view, I don't want to take a chance. I mean, if we are heading down the wrong road for humanity, we need to, or if we might be headed down the wrong road for humanity, we need to start making changes today, whether we can prove it to an absolute certainty or not.
Yeah.
But I do believe that scientists are pretty well lined up saying that it is going to happen if we don't do something about it.
The other guys in Paris, they knew, whether they made public statements, affirming this connection or not. There was a certain emergent quality in that conference. Otherwise, it wouldn't have gotten as far as it did. And so that crowd knew. And I think people in Hawaii ought to take this very seriously, because we are at the wrong end of that formula. I mean, if we had bad storms out here, it would affect us worse than anybody in Nebraska.
Well, if you remember, a couple of years ago, I was giving a talk to the forum, and I showed a couple of slides. Actually, one slide too many, as I recall. Someone was drug off the stage by the MC.
I can't remember that at all.
The slide was pictures of the last 20 years of Kailua Beach and what has happened to that in my lifetime here. It's incredible. That, to me, tells me more than anything else. When you can go and see tree roots that used to be at ground level, and they're so high you can't touch the tree anymore because of the roots, you've got a problem, I think.
Yeah, we have to point this out all the time. You know, it strikes me also, people in Hawaii, they're not really onto this issue. They don't accept it, I mean, as a sort of, general public opinion kind of thing. And the idea of including it in this program, this legislative briefing, is really good, because not only does it tell us that what's happening in the world, but it tells us we should be more concerned than we are about Hawaii. We have to have an awareness, which is going to motivate us to do stuff. If we don't have an awareness, we're going to fall back into, inaction, which is, I think, in large part, we have been inactive about climate change. There's been no infrastructure built for it. New York has built, infrastructure to protect flooding in Lower Manhattan. Serious billion-dollar stuff. We haven't done anything. Sorry, not a thing.
Well,
No
I
answer
think,
to that.
One of the really interesting things that came out of Paris, in my view, at least, was this understanding that, hey, not only do we have to do something, and we all, Jay, you talked about kind of our Al Gore moment 5 or 8 years ago, whatever it was, when everyone just kind of was introduced to climate change. But the difference today is, hey, it's here, and we understand via the science that there's a very specific response that gives us a very specific result. So, if we can reduce our emissions by 80% by 2050, and ultimately if we can decarbonize our society, then we can avoid the worst of these impacts. But that is a very tall order, and I think that, the message needs to be, this is a all hands on deck. This is a absolute, this is a huge opportunity for transformation, but it's something that we have to embrace with everyone in our community and all the time.
Yep, absolutely. You know what Nakodo is? Nakodo. It's the restatement of marital vows. It's a Japanese cultural thing.
Okay.
You kind of get remarried by restating your marital vows. And I think what you're suggesting, Ben, is the restatement of our original motivation, climate change. And we have to do that every so often. Nakodo for energy. Nakodo.
You heard it here. You heard it here first.
Well, let's move on to your 10-step program, Ben. What is that all about?
10-step program. Well, I think step one was, 2008 HCEI, and our state made a tremendous commitment from leadership all the way down through the ranks and into our communities to clean up electricity. And we struggled, and I think you guys probably recall well the conversations back then. Original people said, "How is this possible? How is it going to be done?" And then, our utility engineers and our entrepreneurs and everybody in the sector really stepped to the plate, and they started figuring it out. And now here we got this tremendous progress, right? Step two, and I think that's probably where we're at perhaps, is to say, okay, we've got a handle on electricity. We even just made this tremendous commitment in the electricity sector to 100% last year that, we've got a long way to go, but we know that's the direction and we're feeling the momentum. Step two is to do that same, to get that same process underway in transportation. And I think, my own personal view is that we are doing that. There are great people, really smart people getting together, getting out of their silos, figuring out how to take on the challenge, the climate change challenge in terms of mitigation in the ground transportation sector. And that's exactly where we need to be, and we need to give them the ammunition they need, which is to say, make sure they have the resources, make sure we're continually pushing as hard as we can for the solutions, because of this greater context that we've just seen in Paris with the whole world agreeing. It's got to be now, and it's got to be continuous. And just like you said earlier, we've got to revisit it and can just keep doubling down on our response.
Yeah. What about the legislature, though? I mean, at the end of every briefing, you want to feel that You had some effect on them. You motivated them to do something or not. What message, and I mean only in general terms because it's too early to say, we don't even know all the bills yet, but what kind of motivation would you like to leave with them at the end of this briefing?
Well, I think the legislature responds to the people, right? I mean, that's how it's supposed to work, and that's really how it does work. So, really, what we need to do as a forum is remind ourselves how important this issue is, and get some consensus among people who work on a regular basis in the electricity sector, or I'm sorry, in the energy sector broadly, to just kind of do a self-reminder that this is one of the really big drivers, and don't kind of be numbed into this process where, hey, we're working, we know it's about clean energy, we know climate change is there, but we're gonna, don't buy into the notion that it's just one of the many drivers and there's no traction there. This is an important issue, and if we want movement, we have to stand up and we have to push for it, and we have to give legislators the leverage they need to actually make it happen, because it's all, everybody reinforces each other here, and there's plenty of good people that want to see progress, but unless there's a public voice and a shared appreciation for how important this issue is, then it doesn't get out.
Well, you say the legislature listens to the people, but they also listen to leaders. And, I get a kind of a vacuum on that one because I don't see, I see actually KIUC as a leadership organization. And I see you as sort of my contact with that. But I don't see it coming from the government these days. And I wonder, if you talk about, for example, trying to shorten the period of the 100% renewable energy initiative, which may be a bill that comes into play. How do we get the leadership together? Where will it come from? Who will be carrying the flag on this? KIUC is, to me, important, but I don't see KIUC as carrying the flag for the whole state. How are we going to do that? Any thoughts?
I'd be interested to hear what the fellows next to you have to say about this as well. But
of course.
my own thoughts would be that I'm not sure that we need to shorten the time to achieve 100% in the electricity sector. I think what we need to do is look at it as a whole system, and really look at our overall carbon footprint and say, okay, progress is good in electricity. We've almost been, I would argue that we've almost been too focused on electricity, and I think that's a natural thing and a good thing. That's where we started, and it was fruitful, and we're making progress. But if we're energy policy people broadly, let's broaden our lens and let's really focus on transportation for a while. That State Department of Transportation is ready to move with Ford Fujigami just at the helm, saying, "Hey, this is very important to me." He's got some really smart people that are meeting on a regular basis, talking about the vast array of solutions that are available to us. And I think, Jay, you and I have talked before about how sometimes it feels frustrating because it takes too long for an individual project to get off the ground, or whether it's a bike lane or whatever. But the reality is, these are the early days of transportation transformation, if you will. It's just like it was in clean electricity. It took time for those first projects, and it's, in my view, we're going to see a very, very rapid acceleration of solutions in the next 5 to 10 years, and we'll be able to look back and look at similar progress in ground transportation as we've seen in electricity.
I'm knocking wood as you speak and glancing my eyes toward heaven in the hopes that you speak, that he speaks through you.
That's more than I want to even talk about.
Okay, what do you think, Ray?
Well, I think Ben's absolutely correct, and he's been at it for a while. If you look at his resume, he's been doing sustainability stuff for a long time. And
Since he was an architect way back when.
That's true, and so he knows what he's talking about, and I think he articulates it well. And I'm glad to see that he's taking an interest in coming out and sharing that with the rest of the islands, and not just staying on Kauai. Kauai would be a great place to stay and make that just a perfect place. But I think doing that without bringing the rest of the islands along would not be a good thing. And so it's good that he is helping out. I believe tomorrow he's going to be coming over for a meeting of the Clean Energy Initiative, the 2.0. He's the co-chair, I believe. Is that correct, Ben? Did I read that?
I am the vice chair. Yeah,
Vice chair.
Dawn Lippert is the chair of that group, and she does a wonderful job. But I support her as much as I can, and whatever capacity is needed. So it's a great opportunity. I appreciate being in the room with a lot of smart people.
What is the HCEI concerned with these days? What is it doing?
You know, that's a great question, Jay, and there's a lot of things, but certainly one of them on the agenda tomorrow is actually to get an update from Maxine Burkett on, what transpired in Paris. And so to have this conversation similar to the one we're having now with all the leaders of the electricity sector that are on that advisory board. So that's a big piece. And then, really a key part of that, candidly, and it sounds perhaps trite, but it's really important networking that takes place in terms of people connecting with each other that don't always get a chance to, and make sure they understand how the different pieces are moving on the board and how they can collaborate. Because I think we all recognize that so much more of this is about collaboration than it ever was, and the need to be communicating and to be sharing and learning from each other. So that's part of the agenda, as it always is. Sometimes we pick up the sensitive, tough issues as well. Back in the last meeting a few months ago, we had we spent the entire meeting talking about natural gas import, and there was certainly some differing opinions, but we had a very, very constructive conversation about whether or not there's benefit to that in the state. I will tell you before you even asked me that there wasn't a definitive conclusion or consensus among that group, but it was a productive conversation nonetheless.
Very interesting. Well, let me go to one last point for our discussion today, and that is, these are great moments because somehow, in a funny way, these issues are crystallizing, and there seems to be, and maybe it's because of climate change. There seems to be a kind of new focus, but the whole NextEra merger thing somehow stands in the way. We're not going to have a clear path. You can disagree. We're not going to have a clear path until that issue is resolved one way or the other. For my money, I like foreign investment. I like the idea that this company would come in and make investment in technology that would be far greater than we would otherwise have, and that's always a good thing, in my opinion. But while it's hanging, and while these proceedings are going on, and while the newspaper loves to report on raw meat, same with PBN.
There's a lot of that around.
We're going to be distracted. I mean, it's all caps. That's one of those things in an email, all caps. We're going to be distracted with this, and it's going to distract us from doing more constructive things. And I wonder how you feel about that, Ben, and I'm also asking you, Ray.
Well, I would say this. To the extent that people have the flexibility as policymakers to focus on ground transportation, and let's let that thing work itself out in electricity. I personally don't think it's that important, and maybe there's others who will say, hey, that's blasphemy, but it's not that important, who owns that utility. I think what's important is that we as a community, we as a state, are in charge of our own policy, our own policy in the electricity sector, and have no concerns about someone else coming in to operate a utility for us, because that's all that the utility does. They operate, and they do it under the direction of the PUC, and that's how it should be. So if we're clear in what we want to do, which I think this PUC has been for several years, very clear about where they want to go, then we'll be okay. But we have to have that confidence.
Yeah, and right now we should attend to transportation. What about you, Ray? What do you
Well,
think?
I couldn't agree more. I think Ben said it perfectly. I really couldn't add that much to what he said, and I'm glad Ben's where he's at, and I look forward to watching him. He's going to go places.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd like to have him back to keep us updated,
Yeah.
especially on what's going on.
Yeah.
With the Clean Energy Initiative.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I say exactly what Ray says. Anyway, Ben, thank you so much for joining us. We hope we can do this again with you soon. And we wish you well, and look forward to further discussion and your next trip here when we can get together again.
All right, guys.
Ben.
Aloha. Have a great day.
Aloha.
Bye-bye.
Happy Christmas, too.